Thank you so much, Nancy. And I think that kind of really impassioned approach to writing, and the way often those of us who've been through that kind of university system where writing wasn't necessarily something that people thought of consciously. I mean, I come from Delhi University, where certainly the idea is you get thrown into the deep end. It's like, how you're expected to write papers. How are we going to learn? You pick it up as you go along. Maybe you borrow you look at some papers from other people. Maybe you just do trial and error, and feedback really isn't something you get. So, and that's at the college level. And when it comes to tutoring, like as you mentioned, the closest thing you have is that kind of tutorial experience with the teacher, which isn't necessarily that different from a classroom. You have smaller groups, but you still have groups. You still have a teacher who's sort of can be a sort of imposing figure in some ways. And different colleges have different cultures of that. In some cases, it's really strong. You have to attend your tutorials. They're very rigorous. Whereas in other places, there simply isn't that kind of culture. And even if they're organized, maybe people don't even attend it. I see Ananya saying tutoring is non-evaluative, non-judgmental, full of care. Absolutely. That's something that I think is really important to tutoring. And I often, like when I'm training the tutors, I often say that, okay, you know how to write, but what you really need to pick up is the kind of soft skills, the idea of working with people, making them comfortable, making them at ease. And that can be impeded, I think, to some extent by the sort of perception of tutors. And a lot of you have really, you've all described the different ways in which tutors operate in your institutions, and you've raised, I think, all of you some really interesting questions, and I'd love to hear some of you respond to precisely those kind of questions. But one thing that's definitely that stood out to some extent is this question of, well, we are tutors and we have some amount of experience what we do, but how do students really perceive us as tutors? How do they see the role of tutoring, and and the value of tutoring? And I think to some extent that is, especially students who don't have that experience, it can be colored to a certain extent by what tutoring means in the school context. And so Shreya, since you are, at least comparatively so, you've made that jump from school to college, and what tutoring means necessarily in those two contexts, I was wondering if you could maybe weigh in here and give us a sense of what tutoring maybe meant to you, meant to your peers, while you were in school, and now what it's like in college.
Yeah, so thank you. So tutoring in school was more of a, like, I'd say, last resort measure for that the teachers would undertake for the students who absolutely needed it, but it was not a practice that was seen much otherwise. In college itself, the tutoring programs that we have for writing and oral communication become more of a way to informalize that the subjects that are covered in the classes, especially for students who are finding it difficult to handle the classes and English at the level that we are covering in the course. Tutoring becomes a way to sort of ease their anxieties and teach them the concepts in a less intimidating setting. So it becomes about creating a space that is more comfortable for the students, however they choose to, however each tutor chooses to do so. So some of them might prefer to make it as informal and pure, like peer-to-peer setting as possible, whereas like I would try and make it like clear that it's distinct from the classroom, but at the same time not a, like, just a friendly interaction. So I think this is one of the first things that we learned how to do, how to set up our sessions in such a way that we created an environment that was not intimidating, that was not scary, but at the same time, we were able to still have that academic environment, where we were able to teach them things and like show, like get some kind of understanding on their end as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The importance of, that space being both at the same time, being to a certain degree intimate in the sense that, there's no judgment there. People can, feel free to seek help in things that perhaps they don't feel confident, just raising their hand in a class, no matter how small, and making that known in public. But at the other end of the spectrum, the need to keep it a professional space and, making it clear that we're offering a service really, and that to whatever extent the student, it's catering to the needs of the student, there is also a need to have them trust the process and trust us as tutors. Whereas there tends to be sometimes a certain flexibility in terms of what exactly how a tutor is expected to work compared to an instructor. And I think this is only intensified in the online mode. So Ela, Shachi, I think we'd, in the last discussion we'd had, this had come up as in how tutors kind of see, students actually kind of see tutors as this sort of 24-hour support system, and how online mode really affects that. I see Shachi especially, smiling there. I'd really love it if one of you could jump in and share your experience in regards to this.
So yeah, I can go first. Only yesterday I was having a conversation with Madhura, right? And and she pointed out this one incident that happened last semester or a couple of semesters ago, which all of us also discussed in one of our weekly meetings, was where some TA for a course wrote to Madhura saying that could you please check the papers for these students before the, or something like that, right? Something to that effect. And within 15 minutes, her email was flooded with 30, student papers that she wanted the Center for Writing Studies to check and then forward. And that somehow got entailed as a part of our tutoring duties, right? And a lot of this sort of tendency of students where they have a deadline the next day and they will mail you at night and they'll be like, okay, this is my SOP is due in 10 days. Please do this before I, or, just an essay, which also brings me to the question of the SOP versus academic writing, which I think is a whole different conversation. But yeah, this sort of urgent moment where they have a submission the next day, and you can also, the tension is palpable. And because you have been students and you have struggled with that process of writing and, sometimes being stuck in a writer's block, there's also this level of empathy that you have, which makes you want to interact at that moment. But, with all your duties and work, it's also how do you draw that boundary? How do you ensure that you're available without, making them feel like they have to do a certain minimum amount of writing or good writing for you to be available? That sort of mediation, I think, is one of the challenges. And especially as a tutor, right, that I have seen for myself that when I am an instructor, the sort of conversation students are having with me, the sort of questions they are asking me are different. And the second they meet me as an instructor and it's a student who I have not taught, the interaction also just changes flavor entirely, right? The entitlement is slightly more for their interaction with the tutor, because this is someone who's supposed to, it's like a tuition teacher. Again, it's the difference you had in school with your school teachers and tuition teachers to some extent. I think that also gets carried over. So yeah, that how do you mediate and how do you walk the line of you yourself being somebody who's exposed to that vulnerability of writing and understanding that deadlines can be pressure creating and very much anxiety ridden process, right? And at the same time, how do you draw a line as a tutor without making students feel like you're not available? So that has been something we've been trying to work through. And often we have to draw a line and say that, we do not do this. So as a part of that booking system that we have a one-day deadline before which students, for 24 hours, if today 6 p.m. is my session, yesterday 6 p.m. my slot would have been closed. And for the students to book that, and we need that one day to really give detailed feedback, to be sit with the paper, to be able to sit with the paper and give them good feedback. What the online mode has done for us is that it has also restricted walk-ins. So now we do take this whole one-day process. Now I am also, and we are all sort of wondering that how to, balance this sort of opportunity cost that comes in at a time like this. And I'd love to hear Ela's views as well.
I think I had very similar experiences in terms of both the approach from students as well as to some degree some from the side of some instructors in terms of what the tutoring space is supposed to be. In that sense, a lot of conversations with students has always, which happened during these sessions, has always also been that they see the space as as a copy editing or a line by line language feedback kind of space. Which I understand the importance of doing as well, but I think that what ends up happening is that that's all they see you as. So the minute that you, and that sort of also allows them to then submit essays at the last minute, assuming that it's only going to take you 15 minutes to give them language edits, but you're not really going to be making any interventions at the level of the content, or asking more questions, or pushing for more evidence in a particular argument and things like that. So I think that, I mean, I've heard students also say that their instructors don't really care about the language, so that's why they come to me, that they're just coming for the language bit of it, but the argument is something that that the instructor will take care of and give feedback on. But I mean, those are also, I think that has changed to some degree in the last, at least in the last year. I think there has been some difference also in the fact that I'm now, so last year I was working with science students more than I was working with humanities students. And this year I've been tutoring humanities students, which to some degree simply, I mean, maybe it's also just because that's what my background is, and I'm able to have conversations with students about the assignment even before they start writing it, that they're then starting to see the value in either having that discussion and also see the space as something more than the editing service that they seem to imagine it as. So yeah, that's what I would say for now.
Yeah, that tendency of students to sort of assume we're just machines there for grinding out the kind of help that they need is, I mean, on the one hand, it's kind of heartening because we do want them to feel like, you know, education is not something that has to be intimidating. It's something that can really make a difference in their lives. It can be something that they can expect things out of. But then they also have to be able to see us as human beings who need that. And furthermore, to see tutoring as something that isn't just a, you know, off the cuff or on the fly sort of activity. Tutors need time to prepare their feedback, to take time to actually go forward and help them out. I think Shachi mentioned as part of the call poll app, what that really allows people to do is you get your papers, you get your writing samples, you're able to give feedback on that, and only then are you able to actually have a face-to-face meeting and give you know, personalized sort of attention to the students, right, Shachi?
Yeah, if I may add there, right? So what that does for us is that we have mandated students to send in a writing sample for us, and most students have actually started actively sending it now. But there are times when a student will write to us personally and say, you know, I have nothing written. And we have to sort of encourage them to at least write a stream of consciousness thing, at least just have some idea on paper. But at the same time, you do understand these blockages that come in. And also on the concept of this, you know, this content, structure, language, this sort of triad of things that we are sort of trying to operate with anytime we are consulting a student on paper, and understanding that students are coming expecting very different things with regard to that, right? Although in our poster we mention outright that we do not do any proofreading or copy editing, still we do get those requests and we do not entertain them. We do have a separate language center. We're not very sure what kind of a synergistic approach to build with them so that we can somehow cater to all these three things. But they are, although we want to break down these binaries, they are three separate elements which do tie in, you know, together also, where I have seen how well you can go about understanding content if you actually break down the structure well. And in the same way, if you have sort of that connect with language where you're able to close read, or where you're able to understand the implications of a word that are beyond, you know, just its face value, all of that helps a lot. But despite that, there are disparities in the three as well, where a student who might have great argumentation skills but is struggling with you know, basic sentence formation or with the language itself, it complicates the whole thing a lot more. So to be able to draw those lines and understand which student needs which kind of support, and how do you suddenly, you know, translate the whole thing in a different language for that student, I think that's a constant like teaching learning moment for tutors as well, right?
Oh, definitely, Sachi. I think like all of us can sort of relate to that experience. The not just the problem of, you know, making it clear to students that we're not here for proofreading, we're here to provide a really crucial service, that writing is something that, you know, is as much a part of your education as, say, content. The way you structure your thought and the way you actually, produce thought through the process of writing, and not just see writing as a sort of vessel for your ideas to occupy, is something that's really crucial to writing pedagogy and to tutoring in particular. And the difficulty of sort of adapting that, as you said, to students from different disciplinary backgrounds, students from very different, say, language proficiency, and just the different writing styles, and comfort with different kinds of writing that will be different from student to student, is something that is difficult. And it's precisely why writing tutoring in particular, perhaps more than even, say, content tutoring, but of course ideally the two shouldn't be, content and writing as a process should not be completely hermeneutically isolated things. But the thing that writing tutorial sessions really offer that way is the writing exercise, right? Getting students right in front of you to write something in that session, or to produce writing before the session that can be gone over with, and to sort of be able to tweak those practices, those exercises, to the needs of that individual student. And I know that sometimes that becomes really challenging in this online format, because I don't know if all of you have had that experience, but the kind of face-to-face interaction of occupying the same space can really create a certain rapport, which gives you a greater sense that, okay, the student is struggling with this type of exercise, let's try and reshape it like this. And Shreya, I remember in our discussion, had mentioned that she'd actually taken a certain interesting approach to, working to some extent asynchronously, while at the same time maintaining a certain continuity through using Google Docs in her tutoring practice. Shreya, do you think you could, shed some light on that that sort of tool that you use to help us during this process?
Yeah, so the practice that I followed, at least for my tutoring, was to create a shared Google Doc, like for me and my student, and I had one for each student. And we would kind of use this Google Doc every session to kind of track, like, whatever writing exercises we would do each session were like in the same document, so they could be tracked like across the trimester. And apart from that, I received like all the feedback that the professors were giving the students. So I kind of had that detailed feedback on what's going wrong and what's happening. And I can, like, the professor would leave notes for me saying, okay, this is where the improvement is there, but could you work on this with me, for example? So I kind of had these detailed inputs coming in from the professor. And so we would start off the session by like screen sharing and going through this feedback and making sure that the student had understood like what's going on in the feedback, instead of just reading and saying, okay, I need to work on this, but like, where am I going wrong? Where do I need to fix it? That kind of stuff we would go through first. And then I would try and identify if it's a like concept difficulty or like an implementation difficulty. Like, has there, like, where's the gap coming in from? And based on that, we had a few, like, right, either taking exercises from the classes themselves or whatever that I had with me. And I think a unique advantage that we had as peer tutors here is that each of us knew what was going on in the classes. We were assigned the readings that the students had, and we knew everything that they were learning in the classes. So we knew, like, for ourselves, how to answer the questions and how to like frame a hypothesis or frame a like thesis statement for the essays that they were writing. So knowing that kind of helped us look for the flaws in our students' work and show them, okay, look, this is where you went wrong. This is possible. Like, could you think of ways you could fix it here, or things like that? So yeah, so having the shared Google Doc was, I think, the biggest tool that we used, and it kind of just helped with the tracking, I would say.
Thanks, Shay. And I really love this idea of how, something like a Google Doc, which seems just, it on the face of it like a simple tool, but it can really be used to fit the, like we talked about, the personalized mode of the writing tutor practice. And this is something that, helps us. I think it's really inspiring in the sense, because it tells us about how, we've been seeing writing pedagogy in the pandemic, and in fact even teaching in the pandemic, shifting to the online mode as being an impediment to learning. But it also represents a very unique challenge, and that can really produce innovative solutions from the people who are actually working in that environment. And I think this is one great example of that. If I could push you a bit about that, on that, Shreya, in terms of how the pandemic and how the online mode has made, like we said, the kind of personalized attention we do in tutoring a little more difficult. One thing that I want to bring up is the issue that everyone, all my colleagues certainly bring up, is the difficulty of how impersonal the online format and the Zoom class can actually seem. And that really impedes us as tutors because, as I mentioned earlier, we do provide personalized attention. We do create a certain atmosphere, a certain rapport, a certain bond, which is not possible in the classroom. How does one do it when it has to be mediated through a screen? And that's why this session is called face to screen rather than face to face. I want you, if you could, to weigh in here on how, say, the compulsion to keep screens off or the home environment, how that really poses a challenge to the kind of work that we do, and how you try to overcome that.
Okay, yeah. So the impersonal kind of feeling of online classes, I'd imagine, is extremely intimidating, especially for students. Like we have students at Korea from around India, and for say first generation learners, they're studying in an English medium college and doing academic writing and high level English. But all their interactions outside of the classroom and outside of coursework is not in English. And very often the students don't have any other interactions in English apart from the course material that they're doing. So what I found is that tutoring, so especially for these students that don't have an English output anywhere else, tutoring kind of allows for the personal touch here. So regardless of whether we have our videos on or whether they have whatever's happening outside in their homes, when we start off with our sessions, we started off our first week getting to know each other's background and where we're coming to tutoring from. And then meeting them consistently every week after that and keeping track of their progress. And I think for them, it became kind of another person invested in their growth. So that kind of helped keep the process personal and helped them kind of connect academically, intellectually, and kind of grow their English and all of that. I think that's where it came in.
Yeah, no, that can really be a huge, change to what a student experiences. And it's something that I feel at least is very motivating to me whenever I'm doing tutoring work, and I hope for the other tutors as well. I know Nancy has a really heartwarming, I'd say, story of how she really managed to connect to one of her students in particular. Nancy, could you just tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And before coming to that story, I think what really resonated with me was what Sachi was saying about drawing the boundaries, because writing is such an intimate process, and that many a times we joke around, at Ashoka, that CWC is actually like the stress management center rather than, the writing and communication center, because once you start talking about writing, so much else just comes, and keeps coming. And, then the many a times the focus of the session shifts, and, students want to talk about their angst with the professor, many times with the teaching fellows, with what's happening at home. And and then you wonder how all of that is playing a part in even their writing process, even their reading process. So I think I think while online mode has sort of also it challenges us in particular ways, but I also feel that many times when students do not switch on their video, they are able to speak better. They're able to just say things that they don't want to say otherwise in class, in person. But many times the challenge is, how do we respond to those things? If they are aggrieved against, they have problems with a particular teaching fellow, I cannot really intervene. And that gets related to that, okay, my grade is bad, how would you grade me on this particular assignment if you were my TF? And those are really complicated questions which come with, like, our own professional boundaries with students. So the question of boundary and, SOPs, I think we did this SOP writing workshop and I conducted it over like 2 weeks. And during the winter break, my email was absolutely flooded with requests of, please just look at it. And there were a few students with whom I'd worked for the whole semester. And, I had told them that, listen, it's going to be chutti. So please, if you want to discuss your SOP, let's meet in the last week. And, I can extend my schedule for you, but during holidays, I'm traveling, let's not do this. But their email was so full of anxiety and insecurity that I felt so compelled to keep responding to them, and to keep because I've seen people around me apply for grad school abroad, and I have felt that kind of pressure, that kind of anxiety. So it was really, it's difficult to keep on building those boundaries, and I think the online mode sort of contributes in blurring the boundaries of with our learners. And coming to the student experience. So as a part of English language teaching program that the CWC does, we reach out to you. We have these what we call foundational courses plan, where we have developed the ELT team, and I'm a part of ELT team at CWC. We've developed discipline specific plans to think about writing in a particular discipline. So for example, I am a sociologist, and I in the document I've tried to think about that, what are the challenges of research writing in sociology, and using what techniques, using what, like a pedagogical intervention, those writing challenges for the learners can be overcome. But it also has an ELT focus to it. So definitely English for academic purposes is the basis of that document. So it's like an initiative where we write to all the professors in the beginning of the semester, telling them that if any student in your class is struggling with English for academic purposes in your particular discipline, you can reach out to us. And so a professor from anthropology reached out to us about a student who's for whom English is the third language. And this particular student wasn't in India also, she was somewhere else. And I was working with her because she was coming with challenges in social anthropology, sociology. And so English is her third language, but what she was reading was readings by, we were discussing the other day, Mahesh Rangarajan and Ram Guha, whose English is quite advanced and so located in India, right? So for her, the context was completely different. She did not, when we first met, she did not know what a honeybee was. She did not know what cow dung was. And, because it was a course on nature culture. So, the ecosystem, the geographical location of India was really central to, all the concepts being discussed. And she was reading readings by Tim Mitchell, while she did not have basic English comprehension skills. And I found it really difficult to connect with her, because initially she wouldn't switch on her video also, and she was very silent. And I kind of realized working with her also that English is also, at least the spoken form of English, is also a confidence problem, and not only a language proficiency problem. So, but how do you work on, confidence building in an online mode? And after struggling for 3 or 4 weeks, I used to send her a lot of things. So I started reading, newspapers from Afghanistan, which were being published in English. And, I started to send her those articles, which I thought related to the course also in some way, but none of that was really working. She was not able to, even connect with me or connect with what I was trying to tell her. And then one random day, I was drinking coffee, and I asked her if she likes coffee. And she said, I don't know what coffee is. So I asked her, what do they drink as beverage? And what she described was something very similar to chai. the milk tea that we drink. And you know, then I asked her, what tell me what you eat during the day. And you know, she described me in her limited English what was the how does her food look like during the course of the day, what she eats for breakfast and so on. And then it struck me that, you know, food is something that she's like really interested in. She seemed very happy while talking about it. And then I sort of started, you know, this recipe writing correspondence with her. So, you know, we would both send each other one recipe. So 2 recipes each week. So she would send me 2 recipes written in English each week, and I'd send her 2. And that kind of, you know, really sort of built our bond. And you know, she started switching on her camera during our meetings. She started meeting me more and more. So there were weeks when she met me every day because we had to constantly work on her assignments. But you know, because food is also so political, and it's kind of, you know, sociology of food is something that, you know, is now a fully established subdiscipline of sociology. So the final paper that she wrote for her course was also, you know, the center of it was food and food politics in Afghanistan. But you know, here I think it was possible to do all of this with her because the professor of the course was, you know, she took the initiative of reaching out to us. She made sure that all the course material was shared with us. And you know, she sort of mandated the student to meet the CWC tutor regularly, because you know, we as a center, we do not have the power to say that this session is mandatory for you, that online tutoring or meeting with the tutors is mandatory for you. So working with a professor who understood the need of the student, and you know, sort of push the student a bit, really helped her. And it also made us realize that we can do this. You know, this is while you know, breaking down complex concepts, we can also teach English for academic purposes and English for communication purposes. So it was a very heartwarming experience for, you know, the team as a whole, because we were finally able to connect to her. We were finally able to, you know, just reach out to her.